So my OneView story actually started before I started at OneView. I was actually working in A&P. I was a fairly junior person in the accounting area, and we had this big project called Project Galileo, which was to save $100 million off the cost base of A&P, which was pretty significant. It was a big step up for me, and we had these consultants come in, and one of the more seasoned consultants was actually Connie McCaig, and I got teamed up with her to run through this project. So it was meant to last, I think, about 6 weeks, ended up lasting a few months, and we had quite a challenge politically and just with the people involved, because everyone knew what the objectives was of the project. And so therefore they were a bit threatened by it. So part of our challenge was to gather information, for me being a bit of a rookie, trying to sort of hold a steady path, create some relationships that we're going to sustain, and do the hard work of actually coming up with some suggestions. And Connie and I had such a great time and enjoyed working together, and found ourselves fairly commercially aligned with the way we looked at things. We're different in many ways, because she's the bit more sort of out there thinking forward. I was very much the number cruncher, but at that point in time was really great the way we complemented each other and got a good job done. And we liked it so much, we stayed in touch over the years, and when an opportunity came up 7 years later, to start working together again. So in 2006, we both started working in a company called Pentafin, which is now part of the OneView stable. And at that point in time, Pentafin was a software company with a piece of software called OneView. And we only had a couple of clients, and there was only 16 people. And we're in a very squashed office space. We're very tight. On one occasion, I was actually sharing an office with Connie and one other person, and it was just a very normal size office, wasn't particularly big. So we were all very cramped up in there with our laptops doing our work, and it was so squashed that if any one of us actually wanted to get up and go to the bathroom, the other two actually had to get off their seats, stand up. A bit like when you're on a train and you're on a three-seater and someone wants to get out, everyone's got to stand up and out you go and come back in. So it wasn't really that much private at that point, but humble beginnings of OneView. That's actually where it all started. Those first couple of years, really, I'm not a technologist and we're a technology company, so you're really looking to find ways to make yourself useful, to add value, and this started a pattern which really hasn't stopped for me around the variety of roles that I've had to play. So I was working a bit in finance, I was working a bit in sales and relationship management, and a couple of years into the journey, we shifted the business, and we started operating separately managed accounts, and soon after that took over a business called APA and really brought OneView into the broader platform space. That was a pretty exciting time. We'd gone from being a software provider to a service provider, and very few companies actually make a transition from software to service successfully. But we had to, we had a Perth office, we had a couple of different pieces of software, and we had to burrow down, create some new relationships, and sustain relationships that we had with clients who'd come through these two acquisitions, and worked very hard in that. Dealing with the change and the multiple roles in a company that was now growing, we'd grown from 15 people and we're getting up to 40 or 50, and I was one of the few people who'd been there from the start. It brought out some real personal challenges at the time as well. And I personally had to move at this point in time from being someone who was just a doer and being told what to do, to someone who was going to sort of make decisions and be able to move forward. And I remember a car ride actually on the way to a meeting where I had a very salient conversation with Connie, or actually her with me, explaining to me that if I wanted to take sort of the next step in my career, I had to be able to deal with uncertainty and not just be told what to do. I had to sort of think outside the box, accept some uncertainty and manage my way through it. And for me, I think that was one of the really pivotal times in my career at OneView, which really shook me up and forced me to either sort of stay where I was or grow. And I took the growth path. Wasn't easy, but very rewarding. One of my personal challenges in moving on was also moving myself clear of an accounting role, and I was still doing some of the numbers for OneView at this point in time. And I remember we had an offsite, and we were talking about the hedgehog concept, which is explained by Jim Collins. Find what you're passionate about, what you're good at. And I found that accounting and finance was something I might have been good at it, but I was less passionate about it than what I was. So I voiced this at the offsite, and kind of took the opportunity at the point in time to say, "Hey, Lisa likes this stuff. Maybe she'd like doing it." So she didn't really thank me for it afterwards, because she accepted it and found herself in the head of finance role for a year or so after that. So another person who's had to pick up some varied roles in their own journey in OneView as well. But for a period of time, I was free of the accounting side of the OneView business. That was to change a couple of years later. We'd grown our business, and we'd taken over the computer share fund services and the unit registry business, so again added another business line. And there'd been talk around a right point in time to IPO and become a public company, because up to this time we'd just been a private company, and been through that period where most people around the industry probably still hadn't heard of us, or if they had heard of us, didn't necessarily know a whole lot about us. But with getting some new shareholders on with the unit registry acquisition, we were then destined on a path for IPO. So I had another one of those life-changing conversations with Connie, where she said, "Look, we want to IPO, and I'd really like you by my side in the CFO." And I might have kicked and screamed for a few days, and thinking, geez, I thought I was free of that. And I thought, no, look, this just has to happen. I can't see anything else that's actually good for the business at the moment than actually me accepting this role. Little did I know it was no walk in the park, although I never expected IPOing to be easy, but definitely this was the toughest experience of my 10 years. So it was around 18 months, which I worked in that role. But from the period where we started, we got some new directors, we'd set ourselves on the path for the IPO. The challenges involved from them were many and varied, dealing with new directors, external shareholders of an institutional nature who were used to dealing with people who had experience as a public company CFO, which I didn't have at that point in time. So I knew the business well, and I knew accounting well enough, but still a fair bit of brushing up that I had to do, as well as the own development that was required for me for this new position. So there were a lot of things that occurred during that time, a lot of late nights. There were a couple of occasions where I worked hard really to get home, because I didn't want to get home after sunrise, because I felt it would have been really demoralising for me. And I did actually leave twice after the milk arrived. But in all those challenges, you're sitting there in those rooms, and with directors, you're working hard on the numbers. You want to get the historical numbers right. You want to get the forecast right, something which the company's going to be able to meet. And you realise that there's quite a few people with a lot of money on the table, and they're looking at you for getting those financial aspects of it right. So it was a heavy weight to carry. But extremely rewarding to get to the end of the period when we actually IPO, and had the pleasure of actually ringing the bell at the ASX on the day that we listed. In that time, you're doing everything. I had all the accounting things to go, but one of the things I laugh about in hindsight is the ASX had required us to get something signed by all our existing shareholders. It's called an escrow agreement, but we basically had to get all our existing shareholders, including staff, to sign something and give to the ASX as a record of people agreeing to this. As a result of not getting it done in time, which was a bit of a sort of a mix-up on a number of people's parts, I picked it up, and we ended up delaying our listing date by a day. And that was only just. I had to run around on the morning. The ASX had given me until midday to get these forms back, and there was one which was difficult but possible to get. And so I went up to someone's office. I was running up there because they'd only told me in the morning. I ran up to the office, had it there. For some reason, they were taking their time. I was saying, I got to go. It was like 11:45, and I had to get to the ASX delivering the paper at midday. And so I got the signature and then rushed down George Street, not waiting for lights. At one point in time, I was running as hard as I could right down the middle of the road on the double yellow lines, bus on one side of me, cars on the other. Felt like it was an episode of 24. And ran into the ASX and sort of slapped it down on the table, and my contact there was actually waiting for me. It was 11:59 when I arrived, and he knew I was working hard for it, and he'd actually made a decision half an hour before that he was going to let the IPO go through. So he just shook my hand and said, "Congratulations, see you tomorrow morning." So you get those kinds of things where you're not really technically required to do anything, but you've got to hustle to get something done. So as we get to the end of 2016, OneView as a company with Diversa now as a new acquisition is a much bigger company, and things are very, very different from those early days where there were 16 people and we were climbing over each other. As a bigger company, things have changed quite a bit. So the hustle's still going to be there. The 20-mile march, coming in every day, every week, every month, and delivering your part to the organisation. But we're specialising a bit more now. And as the culture grows up, the company grows up, we all need to keep growing up with it. So the challenges still never stop. But today, it's actually more about focus than the variety. I'm someone who likes variety, so I'll always have a bit of it in my role. But you just need to keep adjusting. There'll be another challenge next month or next year that we all need to deal with that we're not quite prepared for right now. And that's okay. That's actually a really good and exciting part of working at OneView, and I look forward to more of it.